Tonight, the impact of an attack fueled by hate.
The Muslim community, the Arab community is watching this case really closely, in part because of how horrific the crime was.
The emotional submissions in court today ahead of sentencing two brothers found guilty of the 2018 beating of a Mississauga father.
As real estate agents sometimes do, making pictures in the sky of something that doesn't exist.
And CBC Toronto gets to the bottom of a proposed 8-story development flyer circulating in Kensington Market. Why the fear may not be warranted.
And here comes McIntosh to the wall. 204.70, breaking the world's junior record in the event.
Plus, Summer McIntosh does it again. The Toronto teen setting another record in the pool tonight at the National Swimming Trials. Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. We're beginning tonight at a Brampton courthouse where victim impact statements brought people to tears today. In 2018, Abu Marzouk nearly died after being repeatedly kicked in the head during an attack. This January, two brothers were found guilty, and the judge said their actions were fueled by anti-Arab hate. Well, today, court heard about the lasting impact the beating has had on Marzouk's children and community, while the convicted attackers continued to deny they were motivated by racism. Talia Ricci begins our coverage tonight.
When the victim impact statements today mentioned the lasting impact that the violent attack had on Abu Marzouk's children, a few people in the courtroom shed tears. The statements from both Marzouk and his wife described that day changing their lives forever, and they say the recovery process continues to be painful. Marzouk said in his statement, "The trauma that I suffered has left me with a pervasive sense of fear and mistrust, particularly towards strangers or unfamiliar situations. Simple activities such as going to the mall or walking down the street have become a source of anxiety and stress as I struggle to manage the overwhelming sense of vulnerability that I feel." The father also noted that he's experienced a significant financial loss as a result of the attack. Meanwhile, his wife Diana Attar's statement described thinking her husband might die that day and the months of challenges that followed when she had to take care of him and support her traumatized children. "Even once my husband was home, our children would ask me if he was going to die," her statement said. "Our children also had nightmares, and they will wake up in the middle of the night to go see if their dad is there."
The Muslim community, the Arab community is watching this case really closely, in part because of how horrific the crime was, what a big impact it's had on the families and on the community more broadly, not just in Mississauga, but beyond. People are talking about this case as, you know, is this something that can happen to us, like while we're walking down the street or while we're having a picnic in the parking lot.
Marzouk suffered more than 10 skull fractures when he was beaten within an inch of his life 5 years ago. In January, brothers Yanis and Adem Korhemzik were found guilty of aggravated assault at a judge-alone trial in Superior Court. In his decision, the judge acknowledged the hateful nature of the attack, but said he believed it to be anti-Arab, not anti-Muslim. The pair was also convicted of assaulting a friend of the victim who tried to intervene. For its part, the defense argued the fight was consensual, there was no intent to kill, and it was not motivated by hate. The Crown is seeking a sentence of 12 to 13 years due to the impact the attack had on the victim and his family, the fact that it happened in front of his children, and the anti-Arab speech that was screamed at the victim. Both brothers addressed the court today saying they feel remorse, embarrassment, and ashamed as parents themselves. They also said they've undergone anger management counseling and denied the attack was motivated by racism. Their lawyers are asking for the lower end of the spectrum on sentencing. We sought clarification to find out what that meant, and they declined to comment, saying they're leaving it up to the judge. Court is set to resume with a sentencing decision on May 3rd. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Brampton.
Meanwhile, Toronto police are investigating a potential hate-motivated graffiti incident at a mosque. It happened early yesterday morning at the Tawfiq Islamic Center in the 401 and Weston Road area. The building was spray-painted with what police called hateful messages. Investigators say two people fled on foot, and the suspects were described as wearing dark clothing. The vandalism is being treated as a suspected hate-motivated offense. Investigators are asking anyone who witnessed what happened to contact them. Now to a break in a human trafficking case, and that the OPP says resulted in the rescue of more than a dozen victims. A 59-year-old man from Orillia has been charged following an investigation that began last November. As Patrick Swadden reports, experts say the case exposes how migrants are often lured to Ontario under false pretenses.
This labor human trafficking investigation began with a complaint and ended with 15 victims being taken out of an inhumane situation.
Those 15 workers living through squalid conditions, according to Ontario Provincial Police. The victims, all from Mexico, were promised work with an Orillia subcontracting company. What they actually encountered was much different.
Many individuals were housed in areas of limited space. Victims were also expected to purchase their own mattress, which was often shared. The place was dirty and unkept. Multiple victims shared a bedroom and often slept in shifts. They were expected to buy their own food, and as many were not being paid, the food was limited.
The investigation, called Sassafras, began last November. It led to the arrest of Juan Rodriguez Miranda in mid-March. The 59-year-old faces over 20 charges, including 11 for human trafficking. Conway says Ontario has higher occurrences of human trafficking than the rest of Canada. Earlier this month, CBC News reported the rescue of 64 Mexican migrants north of Toronto. They were being exploited by an international labor trafficking ring. The rescue only happened when one of the workers blew the whistle, something this expert says doesn't happen often.
Labor trafficking victims have a whole host of systemic reasons why they may not be comfortable coming forward with law enforcement.
Franzen Tingley says the main reason, migrant workers often don't have immigration status, causing them to be unwilling to come forward out of fear of deportation. She also says the majority of workers don't understand their rights.
Oftentimes they're being subject to threats, blackmail, threats of being blacklisted from being able to come back into the country. They're being told lies by the trafficker.
And that's exactly what OPP say happened to the victims in Orillia. Police saying the accused, Rodriguez Miranda, threatened them against going to the authorities, though police wouldn't comment on whether the workers will be allowed to remain in Canada. Meanwhile, Rodriguez Miranda remains in custody. Patrick Swadden, CBC News, Toronto.
In Oshawa, police have identified the victim of a fatal shooting as 30-year-old Michael Negris. His body was discovered last night in the parking lot of a plaza where he worked at his family's business. We spoke to his friend who started a memorial in his honor.
He's the sweetest guy that I know. No matter what type of day you're having, he always made it so happy, so bright.
Meanwhile, an update on the investigation, and Durham Regional Police describing the suspect as being male with a small build wearing a hooded sweater. Anybody with information is asked to contact investigators. Back in Toronto, city councillors have sanctioned one of their own, voting to dock Councillor Josh Matlow 10 days' pay for comments he made online about a pair of civil servants. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords has those details.
You may disagree.
Tempers flared and tears were shed at Toronto City Hall Friday.
I didn't believe it.
That came from some senior city staff as councillors voted to dock the pay of Councillor Josh Matlow. Council issued the stinging rebuke because he criticized staff personally in online posts last summer. The city's integrity commissioner says his actions were against council's code of conduct.
Speaker, these are very serious matters.
Unprofessional.
Matlow's comments were both made online last summer. In one instance, he criticized a staff member, accusing her of lying about the opening of park washrooms. He also says he could not support the promotion of interim city manager Tracy Cook because of her role in encampment clearings. Councillor John Burnside defended Cook and called Matlow's actions bullying. Staff can't defend themselves publicly because it's against city rules.
It's about bullying people who work tirelessly for the city and for all of us. It's about punching people in the face who can't punch back.
Councillor Michael Thompson demanded Matlow apologize.
I have not heard an apology today. It would go a long way in my view. And I'm going to challenge Councillor Matlow to stand and appoint a personal privilege and apologize to Ms. Cook and Ms. Romanoff.
Matlow defended his comments and did not apologize. He says the Integrity Commissioner's report also shows former Mayor John Tory's office were pushing city staff to only release select information to him on park washroom openings.
I heard, rhetoric from some members today about how a tweet was like a punch in the face. I couldn't help but think about the people who were living in our parks who literally were punched.
Matlow will now be docked nearly $5,000 pay. And of course, this all comes just days ahead of the start of the mayoral by-election. Josh Matlow says he will be running in that race to replace former Mayor John Tory. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
Now to the city's push for safer streets, and Toronto plans to double the number of speed cameras. That's after councillors unanimously approved a motion to expand the automated speed enforcement program. And one safety advocate applauds the move, but says it doesn't address the root of the issue.
Right now, you look at Toronto's most dangerous roads, and they're dangerous because so much space is dedicated to trucks and cars and so little to people. And until we address that, those streets are going to remain dangerous.
Toronto's first speed cameras were turned on in July 2020. The newly passed motion calls for another 75 cameras as soon as possible, bringing the total number to 150. Late tonight, Arkansas's governor confirming 2 people are dead following a devastating tornado that ripped through the central part of the state this afternoon. The severe storm sent people racing for shelter as it splintered homes, overturned vehicles, and tossed debris onto roadways. Some 85 million Americans are dealing with extreme weather across a huge swath of the U.S. South and Midwest. All right, let's get to our weather now with Colette Kennedy. And Colette, quite the soggy end to the work week.
I know, right? We're back into some more organized rainfall, but yes, getting to the weekend, not to scare anybody with this, but in case you're planning on any travel into northeastern Ontario, I just want to show you this system is so broad between the severe weather stateside and then into northeastern Ontario, significant amounts of snowfall, and then in between, yeah, you notice, not cold enough, more of a rain event, although we could see some flurries tomorrow. So this is what's moving through now, this more organized section with some embedded thunderstorms, so locally some heavier downpours in here. Tomorrow morning, I do see a slim area of here where we get a dry slot and likely some sunshine before the front moves through, bringing more rain, thunderstorm risk, very windy conditions as well. Oh, and did I mention the fog that we've been seeing too? On the backside, those strong winds turn towards the northwest. We will get clearing, and that'll be in place Saturday night into Sunday. So Sunday we'll have sun. I'll get into more detail on that because it is going to be cooler. The temperature, though, tonight, the opposite, actually rising towards morning to 9, will be up to 12 degrees. And then it'll start to turn the other way tomorrow late afternoon, Chris.
Just a little bit of everything coming our way. Thanks, Colette. Turning now to provincial politics, and Ontario's minimum wage is going up. The province says it'll increase from $15.50 an hour to $16.55 an hour October 1st. That is a nearly 7% increase. Now, Labour advocates have been urging the government to raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour. Meantime, MPP Kristen Wong-Tam is denouncing the government's decision to end the program that provided health care coverage to uninsured people.
Such an egregious act will have a negative effect on the approximately more than 500,000 people in Ontario without health insurance. Many of these Ontario residents are undocumented migrant workers on work or study permits, homeless or precariously housed, living with multiple vulnerabilities.
And Wong-Tam went on to specifically highlight that the end of the program will hurt queer refugees from Uganda, where a harsh anti-gay law was just recently imposed. A rally to protest the Ford government's decision to end health care for uninsured people will be held at Yonge Dundas Square on Sunday at 3 in the afternoon. A solidarity protest today to mark the International Transgender Day of Visibility. Today's Toronto event particularly poignant given recent anti-trans legislation in the United States.
This is not out of the blue. This didn't just happen on a whim. This is something that, like, these norms and this discrimination and this violence has been in place for years and years and years. And now this legislation is actually happening. So it's much bigger than just legislation, just a law being passed. It's really a representation of how little trans people are regarded in society.
And protesters say that they will demand Canadian governments to condemn their U.S. counterparts. Organizers also want the Prime Minister's office to guarantee asylum status for gender-fluid people fleeing to Canada to escape persecution. Welcome back. You may have noticed some blogs and social media posts circulating right now about Kensington Market. They're concerned about a strip of Victorian homes, warning they could be sold and developed into an 8-story building. It is drumming up fear in the unique neighborhood that it could be dramatically changing in the future. Tonight, our Dale Manukta gets to the bottom of what's for sale and shows us how it's not exactly as advertised.
Kensington Market has always been a hub of creativity and cultural diversity. Oscar Tapia opened Tacos 477 2 months ago, serving up authentic Mexican cuisine.
A really good community. We enjoy the people, we enjoy the service, bring the service and make the tacos. The people, it's really good here.
Now some in the community feel under siege. These images are making the rounds online, showing 7 properties in Kensington Market that could be assembled for sale, indicating the potential for an 8-story building.
And it seems like right now, most of it is a bluff from a developer that these land parcels will be sold off as an assembly.
The images come from a commercial realtor for IQY Canada. This lot at 23 St. Andrews has for sale signage in person and is listed online at $8.5 million. But the other 6 properties along Kensington Avenue are nowhere to be found. The realtor, Joseph Wu, tells CBC Toronto the images circulating are a concept he developed in 2008, and he has no authority to sell the Victorian homes. Meanwhile, the city has received no inquiries nor any applications for the site.
As real estate agents sometimes do, making pictures in the sky of something that doesn't exist.
Councillor Sachs says Kensington's heritage status remains pending, delayed from provincial legislation. According to city planning, development on the rear of the buildings must be limited to 4 or 5 stories, and servicing issues would need addressing. Not to mention the heritage value the properties have for people in the neighborhood.
You know, my parents met here. I've spent most of my adult life here. I think a lot of people come here and they feel like they can actually be themselves.
Yeah, it's an accepting place. You can be weird, you can be different, you can be strange. As long as you're friendly and not judgmental, you're welcome.
What's not welcome, according to BIA Chair Michael Shepherd, is glass and metal condos that would change the character of Kensington. He's in favor of more density, but in the right spot.
This parking lot's not needed. This facility is not used anymore. It's an old poultry facility, processing plant. This could be leveled with no real change to the neighborhood. That is an empty lot.
Residents in the area are gathering tomorrow to organize as 2 other land assemblies threaten the neighborhood. Dale Manukta, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, let's get back to Colette now for a look at the long-range forecast. Hitting double digits tomorrow, but Colette, that is not going to last very long, right?
Yeah, that's right, Chris. Not lasting very long, but not only that, much of the mild air happening during overnight hours. So there's that. And then also it comes with such soggy conditions. So it's kind of hard to enjoy. But there is going to be a warm up into next week, too. We just have to get through the cooler day Sunday. So some of that heavier rain with some bedded thunderstorms tonight. Hopefully the thunder doesn't keep you awake. A dry slot. Now, this is really important. I do see kind of between the 2 components that we have dry conditions for a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours tomorrow morning. Sun's up just after 7 o'clock. Yes, some sun in there, but that heating is just going to help with the rain and thunderstorms that'll come through towards midday, and then we clear out but are much colder behind this system. Watch out for the winds tomorrow. They will be really gusty. There's some of this heavier, more organized rainfall. This is that area in between the 2 batches, which I think could be somewhat enjoyable. And then as the front approaches, those winds that'll be strong from the southwest will eventually change to the west and then the northwest, and that will bring in this cooler air, which means any little bit of moisture left over, there shouldn't be much, but will turn over to some flurries. So that mild air and that high temperature, we're going to reach that tomorrow, but once it starts to change late afternoon, boy, it's going to plummet very, very quickly. but at least we get into those clearing skies and get to enjoy some sunshine there. It won't be till late Sunday night that the next chance or the next system coming in could bring some flurries, and then we get into showers the beginning of next week. Rainfall amounts, so locally some heavier amounts where there'll be some of those embedded thunderstorms, but otherwise, you know, that 20 millimeters or more. Those winds can gust over 70 kilometers an hour, as you see as this moves through. The temperature actually rising through the overnight hours, so that's somewhat unusual. It'll be up to 9 degrees by tomorrow morning. Then we get to 13 before it falls back down on us. A high of only 2 after a morning low of -6 on Sunday, but it is going to be a very picturesque day.
Yeah, and regardless of the weather, you have a great weekend. Thanks. Major news tonight for the future of Canada's telecom industry. The federal government has approved the merger of Rogers and Shaw.
I have secured an unprecedented and legally enforceable set of commitments from both Rogers and Videotron. And after imposing strict conditions, the licenses from Freedom Mobile will be transferred to Videotron.
All right, so here's the deal. It's valued at more than $20 billion, and Rogers will take over Shaw's media and cable assets and have to create 3,000 jobs in Western Canada, where most of those assets are based. Rogers will also have to spend billions to expand its broadband and wireless networks and offer new, lower-cost plans to consumers for both services. Meanwhile, Shaw's wireless business, Freedom Mobile, will be sold to Quebec-based Videotron. Videotron will be required to become a national carrier and offer plans that are at least 20% cheaper than competitors. And the government says it'll be watching all of it. All right, stay with us. We'll be right back. Finally tonight, we are ending at the Toronto Pan Am Sports Centre, where local swimming phenom Summer McIntosh just cannot stop breaking records. Tonight, a world junior record and a Canadian record in the women's 200-meter butterfly.
And here comes McIntosh to the wall, 2:04.70.
Just on fire. Just 24 hours earlier, the Toronto teen accomplished the same feat in the 200-meter individual medley. And of course, on Tuesday, the 16-year-old broke the world record in the women's 400-meter freestyle. After the race tonight, Summer told CBC Sports the Toronto pool she's won a hat trick of records in this week is her favorite pool in the world. And she said breaking all those records with her family and friends around made it all worthwhile for her. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. What an incredible accomplishment by her, and we'll see you back here on Monday.